The concert hall fell silent as Isaiah Bennett rose from his seat in the back row. 500 pairs of eyes turned toward the black man in an ill-fitting borrowed suit. His custodian's hands trembling as he pointed toward the stage where a full orchestra sat frozen mid-performance. "That's my music," he said, his voice barely above a whisper at first, then louder. "That concerto you're playing, I wrote it, every single note." Gasps rippled through the audience like a stone dropped in still water. Security guards rushed down the aisles. On stage, Dr. Catherine Ashford, the music director of Whitmore Concert Hall, went pale, her confident smile crumbling into something close to panic. Camera flashes erupted from the press section like lightning in a storm. Isaiah took a step forward, then another. 22 years of silence propelled him down that aisle past the donors in their evening gowns and tuxedos, past the board members who'd never learned his name toward the stage where his soul had been performed without permission, without credit, without his presence. "I wrote this concerto," he said again, his voice steady now, "in the utility room, between my night shifts, for 22 years. The orchestra members exchanged bewildered glances. The conductor's baton hung suspended in midair. And in that frozen moment as security hands reached for Isaiah's shoulders as Dr. Ashford opened her mouth to protest, as 500 witnesses held their collective breath, the question hung in the perfumed air of that elegant hall. How did we get here? How did a custodian come to claim a masterpiece in front of the city's elite? Why would a man who spent his days mopping marble floors risk everything for music no one knew he'd created? What happened in the 22 years before this moment, and how did his life's work end up stolen by the very institution he'd served in silence, flash back for just a moment? See Isaiah at 5 a.m, pushing his cleaning cart through empty corridors, the ghost of melodies in his head. See him at midnight hunched over manuscript paper in a cramped utility room, surrounded by mops and industrial cleaner, composing by the light of a single bare bulb. See his handwritten scores, hundreds of pages hidden in a metal locker behind bottles of floor wax. See Dr. Catherine Ashford discovering those pages, her eyes widening at the genius she'd found, then narrowing as she calculated what that genius could do for her career. See Isaiah's first confrontation with her, his quiet plea for recognition, met with cold dismissal and a security escort to the door. See the plan forming in whispered conversations between those who believed him. See the gathering of evidence, the borrowed suit, the desperate gamble that led to this moment. This is the story of how invisible hands created undeniable beauty. This is the story of what happened when those hands finally demanded to be seen. This is the story of a man who mopped floors by day and composed symphonies by night, and the moment when silence could no longer contain the truth. To understand this moment, we have to go back to where it all began. Back to the night shift, the empty concert hall, and a dream that refused to stay silent. 22 years earlier. Isaiah Bennett was 28 years old when he first walked through the service entrance of Whitmore Concert Hall, a newly hired custodian with a high school diploma, a 2-year-old daughter at home, and a secret that weighed heavier than the industrial cleaning equipment they issued him on his first day. He could compose music that would make angels weep. Not that anyone asked, not that anyone cared. Custodians weren't hired for their hidden talents. They were hired to be invisible to maintain the pristine spaces where real musicians created real art, to erase all evidence of human presence so that beauty could exist in a vacuum of perfection. Isaiah understood this. He'd understood it since he was 17 when his grandmother Sarah died, and the piano lessons she'd given him since he was 5 years old died with her. He'd understood it when he'd applied to music schools and been told his compositions showed promise. But his family showed no ability to pay $60,000 a year in tuition. He'd understood it when his girlfriend got pregnant, and suddenly music became a luxury he couldn't afford, and a daughter became a responsibility he wouldn't abandon. So he'd put away his dreams like winter clothes in summer, folded them carefully, and stored them where they wouldn't be seen. He'd taken the custodian job because it paid $17 an hour with benefits, because his daughter needed diapers and formula, and someday college, because his grandmother's voice in his head said that work was work, and dignity was in the doing, not the title. But on his first night shift, after the musicians had gone home and the lights dimmed in the concert hall, Isaiah had walked into the main auditorium and seen the Steinway grand piano sitting alone on stage, illuminated by a single spotlight left burning. And something in his chest that he'd thought was dead cracked open like an egg. He'd looked around. The hall was empty. The security cameras pointed at the entrances and exits, not at the stage. His supervisor had gone home an hour ago. The next shift didn't start until 5 in the morning. Isaiah set down his cleaning cart. He walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the 2,000-seat space. He climbed the stage steps. He sat at the piano bench, his custodian's uniform smelling of pine cleaner and sweat. And he played. His fingers found the keys like coming home. The music that had been trapped in his head for 11 years poured out through his hands, and for 20 minutes, Isaiah Bennett forgot he was a custodian. He forgot the unpaid bills and the crying baby and the dreams he'd buried. He remembered only what his grandmother had taught him, that music didn't care about your circumstances. It only cared about your truth. When he finished, his face was wet with tears. The hall was still empty. No one had heard. No one ever would, unless he did something about it. That night, Isaiah found an unused practice room on the 3rd floor, barely larger than a closet filled with broken music stands and outdated filing cabinets. He cleared a space. He brought in a folding table from the utility room, and he began to compose. Not just melodies, not just exercises, real compositions. Complex, layered, ambitious works that drew from everything his grandmother had taught him and everything he'd taught himself in the years since studying library books on music theory, listening to recordings, until he could hear the architecture of genius. He worked between midnight and 3 in the morning after his cleaning duties were done, before anyone arrived to catch him. He wrote by hand on manuscript paper he bought from a music store downtown, spending money they didn't have because he couldn't not spend it because the music in his head demanded to be written, or he'd go mad from the pressure of it. His wife didn't understand. How could she? He came home exhausted, slept 4 hours, then spent his afternoons with their daughter while his wife worked her shift at the hospital. He had no time for music, and yet he made time, carved it out of sleep and rest and sanity. "What are you doing, Isaiah?" she'd asked him once, holding up a receipt for $70 worth of manuscript paper. "We can't afford this. This isn't practical." He'd wanted to tell her that he was saving his life, that without this outlet, this secret act of creation, he would disappear entirely into the role they'd given him, that he needed this like he needed air. Instead, he'd said, "I know, I'm sorry, it won't happen again." But it did happen again. It kept happening. For 22 years, it kept happening. Isaiah's routine became sacred. 5 in the morning, he'd arrive at Whitmore Concert Hall through the service entrance. 5:05, he'd clock in. 5:10, he'd begin his rounds. The building was massive, a landmark constructed in 1924 during the city's golden age, all marble and brass and soaring ceilings that made even whispers echo. 6 floors, 3 performance spaces, dozens of practice rooms, administrative offices, a library, storage spaces, a cafeteria, and miles of hallways that all had to be maintained to a standard of perfection that allowed no smudges, no dust, no evidence that humans walked these floors. Isaiah knew every inch of it. He knew which marble tiles were slightly uneven, which brass railings were beginning to tarnish despite his daily polishing, which practice room windows let in drafts. He knew the building better than most of the musicians who performed there, better than the administrators who ran it, better than the donors whose names were engraved on plaques throughout the halls. But they didn't know him. To them, if they noticed him at all, he was part of the building's infrastructure. A function, not a person. The man who emptied trash cans and mopped floors and fixed the toilet in the women's restroom when it overflowed. They'd nod vaguely in his direction if they acknowledged him at all, the way you might nod at a lamppost or a fire extinguisher, something useful, but not quite human. Only one person truly saw him. Margaret O'Brien. Maggie, to her friends, had been playing violin with the Whitmore Symphony Orchestra for 43 years. She was 71 now, with steel gray hair she kept in a neat bun, and eyes that missed nothing. She'd grown up poor, the daughter of Irish immigrants, and she recognized in Isaiah something that the younger musicians, the ones who'd come from prep schools and conservatories, could never see the weight of deferred dreams. "Good morning, Isaiah," she'd say. When she saw him, and she'd say it like he was a person, like his name mattered. "How's your daughter doing? She must be in middle school now, right?" "High school next year," Isaiah would reply, grateful beyond words that someone had bothered to remember. He had a daughter, that he had a life beyond the cleaning cart. "Time flies," Maggie would say, and sometimes she'd pause like she wanted to say more, but never did. The other musicians walked past him like he was invisible. They'd leave their coffee cups on the edges of stages, their sheet music scattered in practice rooms, their complaints about the temperature or the acoustics hanging in the air for him to overhear as they passed. Never imagining he might have opinions on such things, never dreaming he understood the technical terminology they threw around like private language. But Isaiah heard everything. During his morning rounds, he'd pass rehearsal rooms where students practiced scales. During his afternoon shift, he'd hear the orchestra rehearsing in the main hall, and he'd pause outside the doors, ostensibly checking his supply cart, actually absorbing every note, every correction the conductor made, every technique the musicians employed. He learned by listening. He learned what worked and what didn't, which compositions moved audiences and which fell flat, which conductors brought out the best in their musicians, and which merely went through the motions. He became a scholar of music without ever attending a class, his education stolen in 5-minute increments between mopping and polishing. And at night, when everyone left, he composed. The concerto in E-flat major began in his 3rd year at Whitmore, a single melody that came to him while he was cleaning the men's restroom on the 2nd floor. Not the most romantic origin for a masterpiece, perhaps, but inspiration didn't care about location. It cared about readiness. The melody was mournful, ascending, full of yearning. It sounded like every dream he'd ever deferred, every sacrifice he'd ever made, every morning he'd woken up exhausted, but kept going, because quitting wasn't an option when you had a daughter counting on you. He wrote it down on a paper towel in pencil, terrified he'd forget it. That night in his cramped practice room, he expanded it. The single melody became a theme. The theme became a movement. The movement became 3 movements, then 4. The concerto grew like a living thing, demanding more of him, pulling music from places in his soul he hadn't known existed. It took him 19 years to finish it. 19 years of stolen hours between midnight and 3 in the morning. 19 years of handwritten revisions and crossed-out passages and moments of doubt when he almost threw it all away. 19 years of composing in secret, showing no one, telling no one. Because who would believe that a custodian could create something of value? Who would take him seriously? The finished concerto was 273 pages of handwritten score. It required a full orchestra. It was technically demanding, emotionally devastating, and the best thing Isaiah had ever created. It was, he knew, without arrogance, a work of genius. And it sat in his metal locker in the utility room on the ground floor, filed between his spare uniform and his lunchbox alongside 74 other compositions he'd written over the years. Songs, string quartets, sonatas, smaller symphonic works, all handwritten, all hidden, all silent. Sometimes Isaiah imagined what would happen if he showed his work to someone. The music director maybe, or the conductor. He imagined walking into their offices, manuscript in hand, saying, "I know this might seem strange, but I've written a concerto. Would you consider looking at it?" He imagined their faces, the confusion, the condescension, the dismissal. "That's very nice," they'd say, the way you'd speak to a child who'd drawn a picture. "Thank you for sharing." Then they'd wait for him to leave so they could laugh about the custodian who thought he was a composer. Or worse, they wouldn't laugh. They'd be concerned. They'd worry he was mentally unstable. They'd report him to HR. He'd lose his job, his health insurance, his ability to support his daughter, who was now a junior in high school with college applications looming. So Isaiah kept his music to himself. He composed in silence, performed for an audience of none, and told himself that the act of creation was enough. It had to be enough. Because if it wasn't, if he needed recognition and validation, and his name on a program, then he'd spend his whole life disappointed. Besides, he wasn't doing this for fame. He was doing this because not doing it would kill something essential in him. He was doing this for his grandmother, Sarah, who'd died believing he would make something beautiful of his life. He was doing this for his daughter, so that someday he could show her what he'd built in the margins of his life and say, "See, even when everything seems impossible, you keep creating." He was doing this because music didn't care about your job title. It only cared about your truth. And Isaiah's truth was this: he was a custodian who happened to be a genius, and he'd made his peace with the world, never knowing the difference, until the day someone discovered his secret. Danny Sullivan was 32 years old, with red hair, freckles, and a degree in piano performance from a decent state university. He'd dreamed of being a concert pianist, but somewhere in his early 20s, he'd realized he was good, not great, technically proficient, but lacking that indefinable spark that separated professionals from virtuosos. So he'd become a piano technician instead. He tuned the instruments at Whitmore Concert Hall, regulated their actions, repaired broken hammers and worn felts, and told himself he was still part of the music world, even if he wasn't the star. It was a March afternoon when Danny entered the piano tuning room on the 4th floor and found sheet music sitting on top of the Steinway he was supposed to work on. Not unusual, musicians often left their scores lying around, but something about this particular manuscript caught his attention. It was handwritten, not printed, not photocopied, but carefully penned in black ink on slightly yellowed manuscript paper. The handwriting was precise, professional, the notation immaculate, and the music itself. Danny sat down at the piano bench and began to sight read. 3 measures in his hands stumbled. This wasn't student work. This wasn't even good student work. This was complex, sophisticated, the kind of composition that required serious theoretical knowledge and genuine inspiration. He kept playing. The melody in the right hand was hauntingly beautiful, full of longing and restraint. The left hand provided a foundation that was both supportive and independent, a conversation rather than mere accompaniment. The harmonic structure was innovative, but not showy, the kind of thing that revealed new layers on every hearing. Danny played through the entire first page, then the second, then the third. By the time he finished the fourth page, his heart was pounding. This was professional-level work. This was premiere-worthy. This could be played by a major orchestra and hold its own against anything in the standard repertoire. Who wrote this? He flipped back to the first page, looking for a name. Nothing. Just a title at the top, Concerto in E-flat major first movement. And in the bottom right corner, almost too small to see two letters IB. Danny stared at those initials. IB. Who, at Whitmore Concert Hall, had those initials? He ran through the orchestra roster in his head. No one came to mind. A guest composer, maybe? Someone working on a commission. He should probably return the manuscript to wherever it came from. Find out who'd left it here. Give it back. Go about his day. Instead, Danny carefully photographed every page with his phone. Then he tucked the original manuscript inside his jacket and went looking for someone he could trust. He found Maggie O'Brien in the orchestra library cataloging new acquisitions. "Maggie," he said, glancing around to make sure they were alone, "I need you to look at something." 10 minutes later, Maggie sat at a practice room piano, her experienced fingers moving over the keys, her face transformed with wonder. "Where did you get this?" she asked when she finished the first movement. "Found it in the tuning room. I don't know who wrote it." Maggie examined the manuscript more closely. These initials. IB. She frowned, thinking. Then her eyes widened. Isaiah Bennett. Who? The custodian. Isaiah. IB. Maggie looked up at Danny. Her face flushed. "I've seen him carrying manuscript paper. Years ago I saw him at a music store downtown. I asked him what he was buying it for, and he said his daughter was taking music classes. But she's in high school now, Danny. She's not taking beginner music classes." "You think the custodian wrote this?" Danny's voice was skeptical. "I think we shouldn't assume anything." Maggie's tone was sharp. "I think genius can appear anywhere, even in people we've trained ourselves not to see." They sat in silence for a moment, the implications settling over them like snow. "What do we do?" Danny finally asked. "Nothing yet. We need to be sure. We need," Maggie paused. "We need to tell Richard." Richard Brennan Maestro. Brennan, to most, was the principal conductor of the Whitmore Symphony Orchestra. He was 63, British, temperamental, and possessed of the kind of musical intuition that could identify a wrong note 3 measures before it happened. He was also, despite his gruff exterior, fundamentally fair. When Maggie and Danny played him the first movement 2 days later, he listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he asked them to play it again. Then a third time. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "Where did it come from?" Danny explained about finding the manuscript. Maggie explained about the initials about Isaiah Bennett. Maestro Brennan was quiet for a long time. "The custodian," he said at last. "You're telling me our custodian wrote this?" "We're not sure," Maggie said. "But it's possible." Possible. Maestro Brennan stood and walked to the practice room window looking out at the city. 25 years I've been conducting here. 25 years, and apparently we've had a composer of this caliber mopping our floors and none of us noticed. We notice what we expect to see," Maggie said quietly. Maestro Brennan turned back to them. "Don't tell anyone else yet, not until we confirm. If this is his work, and if it's as good as it seems, we'll need to handle this carefully. Very carefully. But secrets have a way of spreading, especially in closed communities where everyone knows everyone, and gossip is currency." By the end of the week, photocopies of the first movement were circulating among the orchestra members. Whispered conversations happened in hallways. Who wrote it? Where did it come from? The quality was undeniable, but the source remained mysterious. I heard it was a famous composer testing a new work anonymously, one violinist said. I heard it was discovered in old archives, said another. Maybe it's a prank, a really elaborate prank. No one notably suggested that it might have been written by someone they passed every day without acknowledgement, someone whose name they didn't know despite having worked in the same building for years. No one except Maggie, who watched Isaiah push his cleaning cart through the hallways and saw something different in his face now. A wariness, an awareness that something had shifted. Did he know his music had been found? Was he terrified? Hopeful. She wanted to approach him to ask directly, but Maestro Brennan had told her to wait. They needed proof, he said. They needed to be absolutely certain before they made any accusations or offers or promises. So Maggie waited. Danny waited. Maestro Brennan waited. And Dr. Catherine Ashford heard the rumors and decided to investigate. Catherine Ashford had been appointed music director of Whitmore Concert Hall 2 years earlier at 43, making her one of the youngest people ever to hold the position. She'd earned it through a combination of genuine talent, strategic networking, and an understanding that in the world of classical music, perception was often more important than reality. She'd built her career on discovering overlooked works and forgotten composers, giving Whitmore a reputation for fresh programming that attracted both critics and donors. But lately, the well had been running dry. There were only so many obscure Baroque pieces you could revive before audiences started to lose interest. She needed something new, something spectacular, something that would cement her legacy and ensure her contract would be renewed when it came up next year. When she heard whispers about an extraordinary manuscript circulating among the orchestra members, her instincts sharpened. This could be it. This could be the breakthrough she needed. She started asking questions, casually, carefully framing her inquiries as simple curiosity. Where had the manuscript come from? Who was the composer? Did anyone have the full score? The musicians were cagey protective. They'd been told to keep quiet until the source was confirmed. But Catherine was persuasive, and she was their boss, and eventually someone mentioned that the manuscript had been found in the piano tuning room with the initials IBIB. Catherine went to the administrative office and pulled up the employee database. She searched for those initials. 3 results came up: Irving Buchanan, retired board member, Ian Bradley, assistant to the CFO, and Isaiah Bennett, custodial staff. She pulled up Isaiah's file. 50 years old, hired 22 years ago, perfect attendance record. No disciplinary issues, no college degree, address in a working-class neighborhood across town. Catherine stared at the screen for a long time. A custodian. The manuscript that everyone was calling brilliant, that Maestro Brennan was calling extraordinary, had been written by a custodian. Her first thought was disbelief. Her second was fascination. Her third was calculation. If this was true, it was a story, a narrative. The custodian composer, the hidden genius, the feel-good tale of talent transcending circumstance. The media would eat it up. They'd get national attention, maybe international. Donors would love it. Critics would praise Whitmore for discovering him. It would be the kind of story that defined an institution that people remembered decades later. But it would also be the kind of story that centered on Isaiah Bennett, not on her. He'd be the protagonist. She'd be at best a supporting character. The person who'd helped, who'd recognized his genius, but not the genius herself. Catherine sat back in her chair, her mind working. There was another option. A better option from her perspective. What if the manuscript hadn't been written by Isaiah Bennett? What if it had been found among old archives, work from a mid-20th century composer who'd died in obscurity, and she'd discovered it during a routine examination of Whitmore's historical collection, anonymous, no living relatives, no one to complicate the narrative. She could premiere it. She could write the program notes. She could give interviews about the detective work involved in authenticating it, the scholarly research, the triumph of preservation. She'd be the hero of this story. Whitmore would get the attention, the prestige, and she'd secure her legacy. All she had to do was find the original manuscript, remove any evidence that connected it to Isaiah Bennett, and construct a plausible backstory for its discovery. It wasn't theft, she told herself. It was protection. Protection of the music from the inevitable skepticism that would greet a custodian composer. Protection of Whitmore's reputation from the risk that Isaiah might be a fraud, despite what Maestro Brennan thought. Protection of her own career, which she'd built carefully and which deserved to continue. She was doing this for the right reasons, for the good of the institution, for the music itself. That's what she told herself as she began planning how to steal a custodian's life's work. It took Catherine Ashford 3 days to find the original manuscript. She'd expected it to be in the piano tuning room, but Danny had already returned it. She'd expected it to be with Maestro Brennan, but he'd given it back to Danny with instructions to find the owner. She'd expected finally to have to search Isaiah Bennett's workspace, but that felt too risky, too obvious. Then she'd remembered the lockers. All custodial staff had lockers in the ground floor utility room where they stored personal items and spare uniforms. She had master keys to every lock in the building. It would take 5 minutes. She waited until a Thursday night, after hours, when the building was mostly empty. She went down to the ground floor to the utility room that smelled of pine cleaner and floor wax. She opened Isaiah's locker with her master key. Inside, she found a metal file box. Inside the box, she found 273 pages of handwritten musical score. The concerto in E-flat major complete, plus 74 other compositions. Decades of work. A lifetime of secret creation. Catherine lifted the concerto carefully, reverently, and in that moment holding those pages, she felt a pang of something that might have been conscience. This was someone's work, someone's dream, someone's... She closed the metal box. She locked the locker. She left the utility room with the concerto tucked inside her leather portfolio. No one saw her. No one would ever know. Back in her office, she examined the manuscript under lamplight. The handwriting was impeccable. The composition was brilliant. And those 2 letters in the corner, IB, were small enough that most people would overlook them. Catherine took a bottle of correction fluid from her desk drawer. She carefully painted over the initials. When the fluid dried, she photocopied the first page. On the photocopy where the initials had been, there was only blank space. She photocopied all 273 pages. Then she took the original manuscript, put it in a large envelope, and locked it in her office safe. The photocopies, the ones with no attribution, she placed in a folder labeled Archives, 1950s Acquisitions. Then she began crafting her story. 2 weeks later, Dr. Catherine Ashford held a press conference in Whitmore Concert Hall's main lobby. Local media attended along with classical music bloggers and several board members. "It is my great pleasure." Catherine began, her voice warm with excitement, to announce a significant discovery in Whitmore Concert Hall's historical archives. While conducting a comprehensive review of our collection, I came across a remarkable manuscript, a full concerto for piano and orchestra that appears to have been composed sometime in the mid-20th century. She paused for effect. The composer is anonymous. We've found no records of its performance. But the quality of the work is extraordinary. Maestro Brennan, our principal conductor, has called it one of the finest compositions of its era. We believe this discovery represents not only a triumph for Whitmore Concert Hall, but for the classical music world as a whole. Questions erupted from the press. When would it premiere? Had they tried to identify the composer? What made her believe it was from the 1950s? Catherine answered smoothly. Her story, polished, plausible. The paper and ink were consistent with the period. The compositional style reflected mid-century modernism. They'd consulted with experts. They'd done their due diligence. "We'll premiere the concerto in 3 months," she announced. "A gala performance with guest soloists from New York. All proceeds will go toward preserving Whitmore's historical collection. We're calling it Concerto for the Forgotten, a tribute to the anonymous genius who created this masterpiece." The press loved it. The story was irresistible. Lost music, mysterious origins, institutional dedication to preservation. Within hours, it was picked up by national outlets. Within days, it was international news. And Isaiah Bennett, watching the press conference on the small television in the custodial break room, felt his heart stop. He stood frozen, mop in hand, as Dr. Ashford spoke about discovering his music in archives, as she claimed credit for finding it, as she announced a premiere performance with guest soloists and gala tickets priced at $500 each. His music. The concerto he'd spent 19 years writing. The work he'd poured his soul into, composed in stolen hours between midnight and dawn, handwritten on manuscript paper he'd bought with money they couldn't spare. She'd stolen it. She'd found it, somehow taken it, and claimed it as an anonymous discovery so she could build her career on his work. Isaiah's hands began to shake. The mop fell from his grip, clattering on the tile floor. The other custodians in the break room glanced at him concerned. "You okay, man?" one asked. Isaiah couldn't speak. He walked out of the break room, down the hallway to the utility room, to his locker. He opened it with trembling fingers. The metal file box was still there. But when he opened it, his heart sank. The concerto was gone. Only his other compositions remained untouched. She'd taken only the best one, the one that mattered most, the one he'd planned to someday somehow find the courage to share. Isaiah closed the file box, closed the locker, leaned his forehead against the cold metal, and tried to breathe through the crushing weight in his chest. Who would believe him if he spoke up? He was a custodian. She was the music director, a woman with credentials and authority, and the institutional power of Whitmore Concert Hall behind her. He had no proof except handwritten manuscripts that anyone could have written. He had no copyright registration, no legal documentation, nothing that would stand up in court or the court of public opinion. If he accused her, she'd deny it. She'd say he was delusional, desperate for attention, maybe mentally unstable. She'd have him fired. She'd destroy any chance he had of ever being taken seriously as a composer. And even if people believed him, even if he could somehow prove the concerto was his, what then? The classical music world would never accept a custodian composer. They'd treat him as a curiosity, a novelty. They'd pat him on the head and give him a minor commission, maybe something small to assuage their guilt, but they'd never truly respect him. They'd never see him as an equal. Isaiah slid down to the floor, his back against the lockers, and put his head in his hands. 22 years of invisible work. 22 years of sacrifice and secret creation. And in the end, someone with power had simply taken it because they could, because he was powerless to stop them. He thought about his grandmother, Sarah, about what she'd say if she were here. She'd been a cleaning woman too, her whole life, worked for wealthy families who never learned her last name. But she'd always told Isaiah that dignity wasn't in how others treated you. It was in how you treated yourself. You know your worth, she'd said, even if they never see it, even if the whole world walks past you like you're invisible. You know. But knowing felt like cold comfort right now. Knowing didn't change anything. Knowing didn't get his music back. Knowing didn't stop Catherine Ashford from stealing his work and claiming it as her discovery. Isaiah sat on that utility room floor for 2 hours until his shift ended and he had to go home. He didn't clean anything else that night. He just sat numb, broken, trying to figure out what to do. The next morning, he called in sick for the first time in 22 years. He couldn't face going back to that building, seeing posters advertising the premiere of his concerto with no mention of his name. He spent the day in his apartment, staring at the walls. His daughter was at school. His wife was at work. He was alone with the worst realization of his life, that sometimes talent wasn't enough. Sometimes hard work wasn't enough. Sometimes you could do everything right, create something beautiful, and the world would take it from you anyway. By evening, he'd made a decision. He'd go back to work. He'd keep his head down. He'd forget about the concerto. He'd compose in secret if he still had the heart for it, but he'd never share his work again. Never trust anyone. Never believe that his music could exist in the world as anything more than a private act of creation. It was safer that way. Safer to be invisible. He returned to Whitmore Concert Hall the next day, ready to resume his invisible life. But when he arrived, Maggie O'Brien was waiting for him by the service entrance. "Isaiah," she said, her face urgent. "We need to talk." He tried to walk past her. "I have work to do, ma'am. I know about the concerto." She put a hand on his arm, stopping him. "I know it's yours. I know Catherine took it. And I'm so sorry we didn't protect it better. We didn't know. We didn't imagine she'd..." Maggie's voice broke. "We should have known. We should have protected you." Isaiah stared at her. You knew it was mine. Danny found your manuscript in the tuning room. You must have left it there by accident. We were trying to figure out how to approach you, how to offer help without putting your job at risk. But Catherine moved faster than we did. She's smart, and she's ruthless, and she saw an opportunity. It doesn't matter. Isaiah's voice was flat. There's nothing I can do about it. She has power. I don't. That's how the world works. No. Maggie's voice was fierce. That's how the world works when good people stay silent. But you don't have to stay silent, Isaiah. Not anymore. We'll help you. Maestro Brennan. Danny, me, half the orchestra, we believe you. We know that music is yours. Believing me and proving it are different things. Then we'll prove it. Maggie pulled out her phone. We'll gather evidence. We'll document everything. We'll make it impossible for her to deny. And we'll do it publicly during the premiere where she can't hide. Isaiah felt something flicker in his chest. Something that might have been hope, or might have been fear, or might have been both at once. Why would you do this for me? He asked. Why would you risk your position, your career? Maggie smiled, sad and determined. Because I grew up poor too. Because I spent my whole career watching this world tell people they don't belong. And because that music you wrote is too beautiful to be stolen. It deserves to be heard with your name attached. You deserve to be seen. Isaiah closed his eyes, his grandmother's voice in his head. You know your worth, even if the whole world walks past you like you're invisible. You know, maybe it was time the world knew too. Okay, he said quietly. Tell me what we need to do. They had 3 months until the premiere. 3 months to build a case so airtight that Catherine Ashford couldn't wriggle free. 3 months to prepare for the most terrifying moment of Isaiah's life. Maggie coordinated everything with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd spent decades navigating bureaucracy. First evidence. Danny went back through his phone and found the photos he'd taken of the original manuscript, the one with IB in the corner. He'd almost deleted them, but something had stopped him. Now those photos were insurance. Isaiah photographed every page of every composition in his metal file box. 74 works spanning 22 years. Each page showed his handwriting, his style, his progression as a composer. A paper trail that proved he hadn't just stumbled onto one good piece, he was consistently remarkably talented. More importantly, Isaiah still had receipts. Not all of them, but enough. Receipts from the music store where he'd bought manuscript paper over the years. Credit card statements showing purchases. Some went back 15 years. They proved he'd been buying compositional supplies long before Catherine claimed to have discovered the concerto. Maggie convinced 3 orchestra members to sign affidavits stating they'd heard Isaiah playing piano late at night over the years. They'd thought he was just amusing himself, not composing, but they'd heard him. They could testify to his skill. Danny created a video. He set up his phone in a practice room and filmed Isaiah playing the entire concerto from memory without sheet music, with the kind of intimate knowledge that only a composer would have. He played it with nuances and interpretations that weren't written in the score because they'd been in his head when he wrote it. "No one can fake this," Danny said, reviewing the footage. "No one can play a piece this way unless they wrote it." Maestro Brennan, who'd been quietly furious since learning the truth, offered his professional opinion in a written statement. "Having examined both the original manuscript and Mr. Bennett's other works, I can state with absolute certainty that the concerto in E-flat major is consistent with his compositional style, his technical approach, and his musical voice. I have also observed Mr. Bennett play the work with the kind of authorial insight that cannot be learned through performance alone. This is his creation." But the evidence was only half the plan. The other half was the confrontation itself. They couldn't do it quietly. If Isaiah approached Catherine privately again, she'd have him fired before he could speak. They couldn't do it through legal channels. Lawsuits took years and cost money Isaiah didn't have. They needed something immediate, public, undeniable. They needed to do it at the premiere. "It's risky," Maggie warned. "If it goes wrong, you'll be humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Catherine will spin it as a delusional employee seeking attention. You could lose everything." "I've already lost everything," Isaiah said quietly. "At least this way I'll lose it telling the truth." The plan was simple, if terrifying. Isaiah would attend the premiere as an audience member. Danny would buy him a ticket, since custodians certainly couldn't afford $500 for a gala seat. Isaiah would sit in the back. He'd wait until the performance ended during the applause when everyone's attention was focused on the stage. And then he'd stand up. He'd claim his work. And Maggie Danny and Maestro Brennan would immediately present their evidence to the audience, to the press, to everyone who mattered. They'd ambush Catherine Ashford with the truth publicly, in a way she couldn't suppress or spin. It was a gamble, but it was the only gamble they had. The 3 months passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Isaiah continued his custodial work, invisible as always, watching as excitement built around Catherine's discovery. He watched as she gave interviews on public radio, as newspapers wrote profiles of her curatorial genius, as the gala sold out within days. He watched as posters went up throughout the city featuring his music attributed to Anonymous, circa 1950. He watched as Catherine basked in the attention, the praise, the career advancement that came from discovering a lost masterpiece. And he wondered if he had the courage to follow through with the plan, if he could really stand up in front of hundreds of people and claim what was his. Some nights he doubted. Some nights he thought about backing out, about letting Catherine have her triumph, about returning to his invisible life and composing only for himself. But then he'd think about his daughter. who was applying to colleges now, who'd asked him recently what he'd wanted to be when he grew up. A musician, he'd told her. What happened? She'd asked. Life, he'd said. But that wasn't quite true. What had happened was that he'd believed the world when it told him people like him didn't get to be musicians. He'd believed he had to choose between dignity and dreams, between supporting his family and creating art. What would his daughter learn from watching him stay silent? That talent didn't matter, that power always won, that if you weren't born into the right circumstances, you should accept whatever scraps the world gave you. No, he wanted her to learn something different. He wanted her to learn that sometimes you had to fight for your truth, even when fighting was terrifying, even when losing was likely. He wanted her to learn that being invisible was a choice, and he was choosing differently. The night before the premiere, Isaiah couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind running through everything that could go wrong. Catherine could have security remove him before he spoke. The audience could side with her. The press could portray him as delusional. He could lose his job, his reputation, his future. Or it could work. The truth could be undeniable. His music could finally be his. At 3 a.m, he got up and went to his daughter's room. She was 17 now, taller than him, smart and strong, and everything he'd hoped she'd be. He watched her sleep for a moment, her face peaceful, untroubled by the complexities of adult life. "I'm sorry I couldn't give you more," he whispered. "I'm sorry you had to grow up with a father who was just a janitor. But tomorrow you're going to see something different. Tomorrow you're going to see who I really am." The premiere was scheduled for 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening. Isaiah arrived at 7:30 wearing a suit Danny had loaned him. It fit poorly. Danny was shorter and broader, but it was better than his custodian's uniform. He couldn't walk into that gala wearing clothes that marked him as invisible. Maggie met him at the main entrance, away from the service doors he normally used. She squeezed his hand. "We're all here," she said. "Danny's in the balcony with his laptop ready to project the evidence. Maestro Brennan is backstage ready to speak. 15 orchestra members are prepared to walk out if Catherine tries to suppress this." "You're not alone, Isaiah." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His hands were shaking. His heart was racing. He felt like he might vomit. "You can still back out," Maggie said gently. "No one would blame you." Isaiah looked at her, this woman who'd been kind to him for 22 years, who'd seen him when no one else bothered to look. "Yes, they would," he said. "I'd blame me." He walked into Whitmore Concert Hall as a guest for the first time in 22 years. The lobby was transformed for the gala, filled with elegantly dressed donors and critics, champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and excited chatter about the premiere. No one recognized him. Why would they? He was always in uniform, always pushing a cart, always invisible. Tonight, in an ill-fitting suit, he was just another unremarkable middle-aged man in a sea of unremarkable middle-aged men. He found his seat in the back row of the orchestra section. Not the best seat, but good enough to see the stage, to see Catherine when she took her bows, to see the moment when everything changed. The lights dimmed, the audience settled. The orchestra filed onto stage, and Isaiah felt his breath catch. His music. They were about to play his music. For the first time, his work would be heard by hundreds of people, and not one of them would know he'd written it. Not yet. Catherine Ashford walked onto stage in a black evening gown, her confidence radiating like heat. She took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for this extraordinary premiere. The work you're about to hear represents one of the most exciting discoveries in Whitmore Concert Hall's history, a concerto of remarkable beauty and sophistication composed by an anonymous genius and lost to time until its recent rediscovery in our archives. She spoke about her curatorial work, her dedication to preserving musical heritage, the importance of institutions like Whitmore in protecting cultural treasures. She didn't mention Isaiah's name. She didn't acknowledge that someone in this very building had created what she was about to present. "It is my great honor," she concluded, "to present the world premiere of Concerto for the Forgotten." The audience applauded. Catherine took her seat in the front row next to the board president. The guest pianist, a renowned soloist from New York, who was being paid $50,000 for this performance, sat at the Steinway. Maestro Brennan raised his baton. The orchestra lifted their instruments, and Isaiah's concerto began. The first notes were soft, tentative, like a question being asked. Then the melody emerged, the one that had come to him 19 years ago, while he was cleaning a bathroom, the one that sounded like longing and sacrifice and dreams deferred. Isaiah closed his eyes. He knew every note, every phrase, every dynamic marking. He'd heard this music in his head for nearly 2 decades. But hearing it played by a full orchestra, hearing it fill this vast concert hall with sound, was something else entirely. It was more beautiful than he'd imagined. The piano and orchestra conversed, argued, reconciled. The harmonies he'd written opened up into vast emotional landscapes. The rhythms drove forward with urgency, then pulled back into moments of tender introspection. This was his soul translated into sound. These were his years of invisible work made visible. This was everything he'd wanted to say, but had no words for expressed in music instead. Tears ran down his face. He didn't wipe them away. Let them fall. Let himself feel this just once before he had to stand up and fight for it. The first movement ended. The audience applauded. The pianist adjusted his sheet music. The second movement began slower, more mournful, the melody passing between instruments like a secret being shared. Isaiah's hands gripped the armrests of his seat. Soon. Very soon now. The second movement built to a climax, then resolved into a moment of quiet beauty. A pause. The audience held its breath. The pianist's hands hovered over the keys, preparing for the final movement. And Isaiah Bennett stood up. The sound of Isaiah standing cut through the silence like a knife. 500 heads turned. The pianist's hands froze. Maestro Brennan lowered his baton. "Excuse me," Isaiah said, his voice shaking but clear. "I need to say something." Security guards immediately began moving down the aisles toward him. Catherine Ashford half rose from her seat, her face a mask of shock and fury. Board members exchanged confused glances. The audience murmured. Isaiah took a breath. This was it. No turning back. "My name is Isaiah Bennett," he said louder now. "I've worked as a custodian in this building for 22 years, and that concerto you just heard, the one Dr. Ashford claims to have discovered in the archives, I wrote it. Every note, every phrase. It's mine." The murmuring exploded into chaos. People stood. Voices rose. "This is absurd," someone shouted. "Security!" Catherine called out, her voice sharp with authority. But before security could reach Isaiah, Maggie O'Brien stood up from her seat in the orchestra section. "He's telling the truth," she said, her elderly voice cutting through the noise. "I've worked here for 43 years, and I've heard Isaiah playing piano late at night for more than a decade. I've seen him carrying sheet music. I knew he was composing something, but I didn't know what until Danny Sullivan found his manuscript 3 months ago." Danny stood up in the balcony. "It's true," he called out. "I found the original score with his initials on it. I have photos. I can prove it." Maestro Brennan set down his baton and walked to the front of the stage. "I have examined Mr. Bennett's other compositions," he said, his British accent giving his words weight. 74 works spanning 2 decades. The concerto is entirely consistent with his style. I have written a professional opinion stating that this is, without question, his work. The security guards had reached Isaiah but stopped uncertain. The board president stood visibly shocked. The press section erupted with activity. Cameras, phones, recorders all turned toward the unfolding drama. Catherine Ashford stood, her composure cracking. "This is ridiculous. This man is delusional. I discovered this concerto in our archives. I have documentation." "No, you don't." Isaiah's voice was steady now, strengthened by his allies. "You found my manuscript in my locker. You took it. You removed my initials and claimed it was anonymous. You stole my work." "That's a serious accusation." Catherine's voice was ice. "Do you have any proof, any copyright registration, any legal documentation that this is yours? I have better than that." Isaiah pulled out his phone. "I have 22 years of receipts showing I bought manuscript paper. I have credit card statements. I have handwritten scores of 74 other compositions, all in my handwriting, all in the same style." Danny's voice came from the balcony. "And I have video." The lights dimmed slightly, and suddenly the wall behind the stage illuminated with a projection. The audience turned to look. On the screen, Isaiah sat at a piano in a practice room. The video quality was good enough to see his face clearly, to see his hands on the keys. The timestamp in the corner showed it was from 2 months ago, and Isaiah began to play. The concerto. The entire first movement from memory without sheet music. He played it with subtle variations that weren't in the written score, interpretations that only a composer would know, details that revealed intimate knowledge of the work's creation. He played it perfectly. He played it like someone who'd carried this music in his head for 19 years. The video continued through the second movement, then the third. Isaiah on screen played with his eyes closed, sometimes his face showing the emotion of someone reliving the moment of creation, not the moment of performance. No pianist, no matter how skilled, could fake that. No one could play a piece with that depth of understanding unless they'd written it. When the video ended, the auditorium was silent. Catherine Ashford's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. What could she say? The evidence was overwhelming. Undeniable. The board president stood, his expression grave. "Dr. Ashford, I think we need to speak privately. Immediately." "This is a misunderstanding," Catherine said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I can explain, I heard you," a voice called out from the orchestra section. A young violinist stood. "3 months ago I saw you coming out of the custodial area late at night. I thought it was odd, but I didn't say anything. You had a file folder under your arm. You were nervous. I remember because it was so unlike you." Another musician stood. "I saw you too. That same night. You told me you were looking for old storage records, but the custodial area doesn't have storage records." The testimonies cascaded. Small observations, odd moments, details that meant nothing alone, but together painted a picture of Catherine Ashford going where she didn't belong, taking what wasn't hers. The board president's face hardened. Dr. Ashford stepped down from the stage. "We'll discuss this in my office." "You're ruining everything," Catherine hissed. But Isaiah didn't know if she was talking to him, or to the witnesses, or to the situation itself. "I made this concert hall relevant. I brought in donors. I increased our endowment by 30%. And you're going to destroy all of that for a janitor." The word hung in the air like a slap. A janitor. As if his occupation made him less. As if 2 decades of invisible work meant his art didn't matter. As if genius came with a job title requirement. Maestro Brennan's voice cut through the silence. "I've conducted orchestras on 5 continents. I've worked with composers from every background imaginable, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that talent doesn't check credentials at the door. Some of the finest musicians I've known came from poverty. Some of the most brilliant composers never attended conservatory. What matters isn't where you start, it's what you create. He turned to face Isaiah, still standing in the back row. Mr. Bennett, would you join us on stage? Isaiah's legs felt like water. The distance from his seat to the stage seemed infinite. But he walked, past the security guards who'd stopped trying to remove him, past the audience members who turned to watch him with expressions ranging from skepticism to wonder, past Catherine Ashford, who looked at him with naked hatred. He climbed the steps to the stage. This stage he'd cleaned 1,000 times, and stood in the spotlight for the first time in his life. The audience was silent, waiting. "I'm not a great speaker," Isaiah said, his voice amplified by the stage microphones. "I'm not educated. I didn't go to conservatory. I don't have credentials or connections or anything that's supposed to matter in classical music." He paused, gathering courage. "But I can write music. I've been writing music since I was 5 years old when my grandmother taught me piano. I've been writing music through everything, through poverty and work and exhaustion and every reason I had to quit. Because I needed to. Because not writing it would have killed something in me." His voice grew stronger. "Dr. Ashford said, I'm just a janitor, like that makes my work worthless. But I want to tell you something. I've cleaned these floors for 22 years. I've polished this brass. I've maintained this building so that musicians could make art in a beautiful space. That work has dignity. That work matters. And it doesn't make me less capable of creating something beautiful." The audience was listening now, truly listening. Some faces showed sympathy. Others showed guilt. A few showed anger at Catherine, at themselves, at a system that had allowed this to happen. "I'm not asking for charity," Isaiah continued. "I'm not asking you to lower your standards or feel sorry for me. I'm asking you to judge my work on its merits. Listen to what I've written. If it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. But don't dismiss it because of where it came from. Don't assume it can't be art because I spent my days with a mop instead of a baton." He looked at Catherine Ashford, who'd turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "You were wrong," he told her. "You thought stealing my work would protect the music, that people wouldn't respect it if they knew a custodian wrote it. But music doesn't need your protection. It doesn't need fancy origin stories or institutional approval. It needs to be heard. And the truth of who created it, that doesn't diminish the work. It enriches it." The audience began to applaud. Slowly at first, then building. People stood. Not all of them, but enough. The applause grew louder, transforming from polite to genuine to thunderous. They weren't applauding the performance. They were applauding Isaiah, his courage, his truth, his refusal to stay invisible. The board president stepped onto the stage, his expression sorrowful but resolved. "On behalf of Whitmore Concert Hall, I apologize. This should never have happened. Your work should never have been taken without your permission, without your credit, without your knowledge. We failed you, Mr. Bennett, and we will work to make this right." He turned to Catherine Ashford. "Dr. Ashford, your employment with Whitmore Concert Hall is terminated effective immediately. The board will be conducting a full investigation into this matter and any other irregularities during your tenure. Security will escort you from the building." Catherine stood frozen for a moment, the weight of her choices crushing down on her. Her career, her reputation, her carefully constructed life, all of it crumbling. She looked at Isaiah with something that might have been hatred, or might have been recognition that she'd destroyed herself. "You've ruined everything," she said quietly. "No," Isaiah replied. "You did that yourself." Security led her away. The audience watched in silence, processing what they'd witnessed. The press section was in frenzy, reporters calling their editors, updating their live streams, documenting the scandal in real time. Maestro Brennan stepped forward and addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves in an unusual situation. The concerto you've been hearing tonight is indeed a masterpiece, but it was not written by an anonymous composer from the 1950s. It was written by Isaiah Bennett, who has worked in this building for 22 years, and who is, I can personally attest, a composer of extraordinary talent." He paused. "If Mr. Bennett is willing, I'd like to restart the performance from the beginning, properly attributed this time. And I'd like to invite him to take a bow at the end, not as a custodian, but as the composer he is." The audience erupted in approval. Calls of "yes" and "let him conduct" and "play it again." Maestro Brennan looked at Isaiah. "Would you do us the honor?" Isaiah nodded, overwhelmed. Maestro Brennan gestured to the piano. "Would you like to perform it yourself? Your playing in that video was magnificent." For a moment, Isaiah considered it. To sit at that Steinway to play his own concerto in front of hundreds of people, to be the performer as well as the composer. But he shook his head. "Let the guest pianist play it," he said. "He prepared for this. He deserves to perform. I just want to hear it, all of it, with my name attached." The pianist, who'd been sitting frozen during the entire confrontation, stood and bowed to Isaiah. "It would be my honor to play your work, Mr. Bennett. And for what it's worth, this is one of the finest concertos I've ever performed." Isaiah descended from the stage and returned to his seat. The lights dimmed. The audience settled, but the atmosphere was different now. Electric, charged with the knowledge of what they'd witnessed, what they were about to hear. Maestro Brennan raised his baton. The orchestra lifted their instruments, and they began again. From the beginning. Isaiah Bennett's concerto in E-flat major, properly attributed, finally honest. Isaiah listened with his eyes closed, tears streaming down his face. This time, when he heard his music fill that concert hall, it wasn't stolen. It was his. Acknowledged, recognized, real. This time he wasn't invisible. The premiere ended at 10:30. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Isaiah was called to the stage 3 times to bow, and each time the applause grew louder, the audience refusing to let him retreat back into invisibility. The press swarmed him afterward. National news had picked up the story within an hour. By midnight, Custodian Composer was trending on social media. By morning, Isaiah Bennett's name was known worldwide. The offers came fast. A recording contract for the concerto, commissions from 3 different orchestras, an invitation to be a guest composer at a prestigious summer festival, interview requests from every major media outlet, a book deal to tell his story. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was everything he'd never imagined and nothing he'd known how to prepare for. The Whitmore Concert Hall Board offered him a formal position, composer in residence, with a salary and office and a promise to premiere all his other works over the coming seasons. They offered him $70,000 a year, more money than he'd ever made enough to send his daughter to college, without loans enough to finally stop worrying about bills. "There's one condition," the board president said. "You have to give up the custodial position. It wouldn't be appropriate for our composer in residence to also be cleaning the floors." Isaiah sat in the boardroom surrounded by people who'd never acknowledged him before and thought about that condition. Thought about the metal locker where he'd kept his compositions. Thought about the utility room where he'd spent 22 years composing in secret. Thought about his grandmother, Sarah, who'd cleaned houses her whole life and taught him that work was work. Dignity was in the doing. "I'll accept the composer position," Isaiah said slowly. "But I'd like to keep working as a custodian part-time. Maybe 20 hours a week." The board members exchanged confused glances. "Mr. Bennett, you don't have to do that. You've earned the right to—" "I know I don't have to," Isaiah interrupted. "But I want to. That work keeps me grounded. It reminds me where I came from. And I don't want to become someone who forgets that the people who clean these floors have as much dignity as the people who perform on these stages." He met their eyes one by one. "If I give up that work entirely, I'm saying it wasn't good enough. I'm saying I'm better than it now. But I'm not better than it. I'm just different now. And the work still matters." There was a long silence. Then the board president nodded. "Very well. 20 hours a week in custodial, the rest as composer in residence. But Mr. Bennett, you'll be setting quite an example." "Good," Isaiah said. "Let me set an example that you don't have to leave where you came from to get where you're going." The story grew. Articles were written about class and classical music, about hidden talent, about institutional failures and individual courage. Catherine Ashford became a cautionary tale. The board implemented new policies about recognizing employee contributions, about creating pathways for non-traditional talent, about seeing the people who made their institution function. But Isaiah's favorite outcome was quieter, smaller, more personal. 3 months after the premiere, he used his first royalty check to establish the Sarah Bennett Scholarship Fund, named for his grandmother. It provided full funding for music students from working-class backgrounds, the kids who had talent, but not money, who loved music, but couldn't afford conservatory. The first recipient was a 19-year-old janitor from a concert hall in Philadelphia who'd been composing in secret for 4 years. The second was a hospital cleaner from Detroit who played violin. The third was a waitress from Nashville who wrote songs between shifts. Isaiah mentored all of them. He knew what they needed, not pity, not charity, but recognition. Someone to say, "Your work matters. Your talent is real. Keep creating even when no one's watching." He kept his promise to work part-time as a custodian. Some nights you could find him in his old utility room, now equipped with a piano donated by the board, working on a new composition surrounded by cleaning supplies that reminded him where he'd come from. He taught his scholarship students in that room. Not in a fancy office, not in an elegant studio, but in the same space where he'd spent 22 years composing in secret. Why, here one student asked, "You could teach anywhere now." Isaiah looked around the small room at the mops in the corner, at the industrial cleaner on the shelves, at the metal locker where he'd kept his dreams hidden. "Because this room taught me something important," he said. "It taught me that genius doesn't need permission. It doesn't need perfect conditions. It doesn't need the right credentials or the right connections. It just needs dedication and courage." He smiled at his students, these young people who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd been invisible until someone finally saw them. Music doesn't care where you compose it. It doesn't care if you're wearing a uniform or a tuxedo, if you have a degree or a GED, if you come from money or from nothing. It only cares about truth. And if you have truth in you, if you have something real to say, then say it. Write it. Create it. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to tell you you're allowed. His daughter, now in college studying architecture, sometimes asked him if he regretted the years of invisibility, the 2 decades spent cleaning floors when he could have been composing openly if he'd been born into different circumstances. "No," Isaiah would tell her. "Those years made me who I am. They taught me that your value isn't in what others see. It's in what you know about yourself. And they taught me that sometimes the most important work happens in silence, in secret, in the hours when no one's watching. Because that's when you find out what you really care about. That's when you discover what you'd create, even if no one ever heard it." The concerto in E-flat major has now been performed in 23 countries. It's been recorded 4 times. Music scholars have written dissertations about its structure, its emotional depth, its place in contemporary American composition. But Isaiah's favorite performance happened 1 year after the premiere on a Tuesday afternoon, when he brought a recording of it to the cemetery where his grandmother Sarah was buried. He sat by her grave, played the music on a portable speaker, and told her everything that had happened. "You were right," he said to the headstone. "You told me music didn't care about circumstances. You told me to keep playing, keep creating, even when it felt impossible. You told me dignity was in the doing, not the recognition." The concerto played the melody he'd written 19 years ago while cleaning a bathroom, now transformed into orchestral beauty. He listened to the end, then spoke again. "I'm still cleaning floors sometimes, Grandma. People think that's strange, that I should have left that work behind. But you would understand. You cleaned houses your whole life, and you were never ashamed of it. You taught me that work is work, that there's honor in service, that the person who cleans the concert hall is as important as the person who performs on the stage." A breeze moved through the cemetery, rustling the leaves. Isaiah imagined it was his grandmother's response, her approval, her pride. "I'm teaching now," he continued. "Kids like me who love music but don't fit the mold. I'm showing them what you showed me, that you don't need permission to create. You just need courage." He placed his hand on the headstone. "Thank you for teaching me piano. Thank you for believing I could make something beautiful. Thank you for giving me permission to be exactly who I am." As he walked back to his car, his phone buzzed with a message from one of his scholarship students. She'd just finished her first composition, a string quartet. She wanted to know if he'd look at it, give her feedback, tell her if it was any good. Isaiah smiled. He'd look at it tonight after his custodial shift in the utility room where dreams grew despite impossible odds, because that's what he did now. He created music, and he cleaned floors, and he taught young people that those two things didn't contradict each other. That you could be both. That your work didn't define your worth. Your talent didn't require validation. Your genius didn't need permission. And in that small utility room at Whitmore Concert Hall, where mops still stood beside a piano, where cleaning supplies shared space with sheet music, Isaiah Bennett continued to prove what his grandmother always knew, that music doesn't ask for your resume. It doesn't check your credentials or count your degrees. It doesn't care if you came from mansions or poverty conservatories or closets. It only asks for your heart, your truth, your willingness to create even when no one's watching, and your courage to stand up when everyone is. 22 years of invisible dedication became visible not through permission, but through undeniable truth. And somewhere in that truth, a new generation learned that the greatest symphonies aren't always composed in concert halls. Sometimes they're written in the quiet hours by those brave enough to create when no one's watching, and courageous enough to stand when everyone is. Isaiah Bennett, custodian and composer, proved that genius doesn't wait for the world's approval. It simply creates. And then when the moment comes, it demands to be seen. His concerto plays on. His students compose. His story echoes through every concert hall, where someone invisible creates something beautiful and waits for the courage to claim it. And in the utility room at Whitmore Concert Hall, the lights stay on late into the night, where dreams refuse to stay silent, and truth eventually finds its voice.